Hi, welcome to Wellness Fridays. I'm Diana Alvear, and I am so stoked about today's guest. You are going to learn so much. I have been hooked on everything that he has written, all of his talks, all of his videos, because I'm telling you that he has some things that you need to hear, especially if you're a parent. We're going to be talking a lot about what you can do about too much screen time for you right now during this time of the pandemic and also for your kids. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Nir Eyal. Nir, thank you so much for joining me today. And first of all, tell me a little bit about what you do, what you've written.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I am a behavioral designer, so I help companies build the kind of products and services that build healthy habits in people's lives. This came out of several years of research. I used to teach at Stanford for many years at the Graduate School of Business and then later at the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. And my research was really about how do companies that we think of as the most habit-forming products out there, when we think about the technology companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Netflix and Amazon, these companies that change our behaviors and change our habits so profoundly, what can we learn from these companies so that we can make all sorts of other products and services more engaging? And so that was the subject of the class I taught at Stanford. It's also the topic of my first book, Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And since that book was published, it's been used by every conceivable industry to help people use products and services in a way that's easier to use, more user-friendly, a product that you want to use as opposed to a product you feel like you have to use. And it's been used to help people build healthy habits, including products like Kahoot, the world's largest educational software company. If you have school-age kids, chances are your kids use Kahoot because it uses the hook model to get kids hooked onto learning. Companies like Fitbod have used the hooked model to get people hooked to exercise. I've worked with companies like the New York Times to get people hooked to local news. So there's all kinds of ways that we can use these particular practices to help people build good habits with the products and services they use. Now, the flip side is that there's also a cost to products built so well that sometimes we find that we overuse them and at times abuse them. And so this was kind of the scenario that I found myself in several years ago. That a few years ago, I remember I was with my daughter one afternoon and we had this beautiful afternoon planned. And I remember we had this activity book of different things that daddies and daughters could do together, make paper airplanes, ask each other interesting questions. And I remember that one of the questions in this daddy and daughter book was this: if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said, because in that moment, I thought it was a good time to just check this one quick thing on my phone. Wait a second, honey, I had to do this one quick thing. And by the time I looked up from my screen, from my phone, I realized that she was gone. She had left the room to play with some toy outside, and I had blown this perfect daddy-daughter moment. And so that's when I realized that I had to change something in my own life, because if I'm honest with you, it wasn't just with my daughter. It was when I would say to myself, I'm definitely going to exercise today, but I didn't. I would say I'm definitely going to eat right, but I wouldn't. I would say I was definitely going to work on that big project that I have to finish, and yet I'd procrastinate for yet another day.
And
And
can I
so it
tell
wasn't.
you how gratifying it is to hear you, the expert, say that you struggle with this too? Because we
Oh, let me
beat
tell you.
ourselves up for this. We beat ourselves up for this. So
Yeah.
you delved into this as usual as a researcher and wanting to understand this. And what'd you come up with?
Well, I mean, I wrote this for me more than anyone else because I have always struggled with self-control. I have always struggled with, the conventional advice. I used to be clinically obese at one point in my life, and it's actually very analogous. The struggle that we're having today with technology overuse and distraction is very similar to the problems that we have when we overeat. I mean, distraction is all about doing something you didn't intend to do. And so whether that's spending too much time on your phone, working too much, watching too much TV, or eating too much, anything that is not what you plan to do is a distraction. And so what I learned from this 5 years of research writing this book, Indistractable, is that there are actually 4 steps to becoming indistractable. And it turns out that all of us can become indistractable, that all we need to do is follow these steps. They're not necessarily easy. I don't want you to think that it's snap your finger solution. It took me a lot of time, 5 years, to write this book because I kept getting distracted. But then once I discovered these techniques and applied them to my own life, every facet of my life has changed. I'm in better shape than I've ever been in my life. I'm 42 years old and I've never been in better physical shape because I exercise when I say I will. I've have a better relationship with my wife of 18 years than ever before because I'm there. She can rely upon me. I don't do the things I used to do where I used to skip out on my obligations, on the household responsibilities. I am an equal partner in my marriage because I am indistractable. I have a great relationship with my daughter now that I never had before because I'm fully present with her. I do more at work. I do what I say I'm going to do at work. And so there's really no facet of my life. And so today, if you ask me what superpower I would most want, it's the power to be indistractable, the power to simply do whatever it is you say you're going to do with your time and with your life.
That was hard enough, Nir, when we were not in these conditions. When we were having a regular day, getting ready for work, getting in our cars and dropping the kids off at daycare or school and going to work for 8 hours and coming home, you would sit there and think to yourself, well, when do I have the time to do any of this? Now, however, I feel like the script has been flipped. We're home all the time, obviously for good reasons, to protect one another, but we're also pretty much chained to our technology. And that's, I think, where a lot of us are struggling because we're spending so much time in front of our computers, and how do we manage all of this kind of compulsory screen time? And then you have the distractionary type screen time where maybe you just want some brain candy, so you lose yourself in FaceTime or Facebook or Twitter, or you play video games. What do we need to be careful of here? How do we need to manage this so that we emerge from this situation healthy?
Yeah. So this is a great time to talk about what is distraction really. Most people think that distraction is about the thing that we are using, right? And that somehow Facebook is evil and video games are bad. And I am not one of those chicken little tech critics that tells you that the sky is falling and these technologies are melting your brain. It's ridiculous and it's elitist because for the vast majority of us, we can't just stop using these technologies. We don't need some professor in an ivory tower to tell us, well, just stop checking email, stop getting distracted with Facebook. I mean, many of us rely upon these tools for our livelihood. So it's not that simple. And I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with using these tools. Now, here's the thing. We have to understand what is distraction. And the best way to understand what distraction is to understand what distraction is not. So what is the opposite of distraction? Most people will tell you the opposite of distraction is focus, but that's actually not true. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction. If you look at the origin of both words, they both come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull. And they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction, by definition, is any action that pulls you towards what you said you were going to do, that pulls you towards things you do with intent, that pull you towards your values and help you become the kind of person you want to become. The opposite of traction is distraction. Any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, anything that is not aligned with your values, that pulls you away from becoming the kind of person you know you can become. So that's the difference between traction and distraction. Now, the reason this is so important is because any action can be either traction or distraction. Let me give you a great example. Before I wrote this book, this was my daily routine at work. I would sit down at my desk and I would say, okay, now I'm going to get to work. I'm not going to procrastinate. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm going to work on that big project that I've been delaying. I'm going to finish that RFP. I'm going to finish that slide deck, whatever it is. No more procrastination, no more distraction. Here I go. I'm going to get started right now. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm going to get started. Here I go. But first, let me check some email. Right? First,
because you're getting pinged left and right.
That one thing that I had to just check off because it's easy to do. Let me just do that first real quick, and then I'll get started, right? See, the thing I didn't realize is that is the most dangerous and deceptive form of distraction. Because when you trick yourself into thinking that whatever it is that I'm doing, the emails, the thing on my to-do list, the Slack notifications, that stuff is more important than the thing I said I was going to do, you are letting distraction fool you into prioritizing the easy and the urgent at the expense of the important. And that is the most dangerous form of distraction. The distractions we don't even notice are distracting us, okay? So just because it's worky doesn't mean it's not a distraction. If it's not what you said you're going to do with your time, by definition, it's a distraction. So just like any action can become a distraction, any action can be traction. So there's nothing wrong with checking Facebook. There's nothing wrong with Instagram or YouTube or anything you want to do with your time. Why do we have this ridiculous moral hierarchy that, oh, you playing a video game, that's frivolous, but me watching football, that's okay? No, anything you want to do with your time is fine as long as you do it on your schedule, not someone else's. Remember, the time you plan to waste is not wasted time. So the beauty of becoming indistractable is that you can actually enjoy leisure time without guilt. So many of us feel bad. You know, one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity is to run your day on a to-do list. This has been shown to be one of the
What? Stop,
worst
stop, 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 stop.
things that
You're
you can
blowing
do.
my mind. Hold on, Nir, hold on. You're telling me that one of the worst things that I can do is run my life on a to-do list, because that's what I mean, as a mother of two small kids with a full-time job, I have to have a to-do list. So what are we going to do? What's the
Right.
answer?
So here's the problem with to-do lists. There are lots of problems with to-do lists. And I'm not saying it's wrong to keep a register of all the stuff you need to do. What I am against is waking up in the morning and saying, what should I do right now? Let me check my to-do list. There are a few really, really big problems with that. Number one, you're never done with a to-do list. Putting stuff on the to-do list is so easy. And I used to do this, right? I used to be the patient zero here. I used to do this all the time. I would put everything on the to-do list and I'd have 1,000 items. But then if you ask me, hey, when was the last time you actually finished anything on your to-do list? I'm sorry, everything on your to-do list. If you ask the average person who keeps a to-do list and runs their life based on a to-do list, you ask them, hey, when was the last time you finished everything you said you were going to do today? I guarantee you the answer is never. And yet
Yes, never ending. I'm looking at I have 14 items on my whiteboard in front of me, and that's just my personal life. And then
there
I
you
have
go.
other items next to it that's for work. And I just look up and I feel very tired.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? So I used to be exactly in this scenario. And so think about it, right? If you bought a phone and your phone crashed every day, you take it back to the store. You say, this is a crappy phone. It's defective. And yet here we are using this system that we have been sold, this bag of goods, this lie that this is supposed to be the way we become productive. It's not working. Every day it crashes. You're not doing what you said you were going to do. And so the reason this is so harmful, there's a few reasons. Number one, it reinforces the wrong identity. Let me tell you, one thing that the research shows is unequivocal is that behavior change is identity change. Let me say that again. Behavior change is identity change. So any identity you reinforce day after day, you start believing. Well, what identity is reinforced by a list of to-dos that every day tells you, hey, you didn't do what you said you were going to do today,
Oh my
loser.
gosh, I'm laughing because I recognize myself in what you're saying, because I get upset with myself because I
Yes.
don't finish everything that I wanted to get done. And then I blame, oh, well, I've been chained to my computer all day. And then I wanted to see what everybody was up to on Facebook. And
Right.
then, yeah.
Right. So here's the second big problem is that even when you're done with your to-do list and you say, okay, I want to relax with my family, right? I want to just sit down for the day and I want to just, play with my kids. I want to watch something on Netflix, because you always have more on that to-do list. You always have stuff that you still didn't get done. It's never ending. Even when you have leisure time, if you're anything like I used to be, it's always in the back of your head. Oh, I still got emails. I still have that thing that I didn't do at work. I still have that RFP I didn't complete. I still have more and more and more. So even the leisure time you can't really enjoy, which is
Okay. So
terrible.
now that you've now that you've laid my life bare for all of our viewers, because I know that they feel the same way, what's the answer?
The alternative, and this is not a technique I made up. This has been around for decades, and thousands of studies have shown that this is an incredibly effective technique. It's called what the psychologists call making an implementation intention, which is just a fancy way of saying that you're going to plan out what you're going to do, and most critically, when you are going to do it. So we do not live our lives according to to-do list. That is a terrible idea. Instead, what you want to do is to plan your day by turning your values into time. Okay. If there's one
Ooh, wait,
truth I
say that
want you to,
again. Say that again so that everybody can write that down. Turning
yeah.
your
So
values.
here's the mantra I want you to remember. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So I hear people all the time, like I used to say, I had all this stuff on my to-do list, but I didn't get them done because I had this call, and then my kids wanted this, and my husband wanted that, and my wife wanted that, and my boss asked for this. And then you say, yeah, but what did you plan to do with your time? Oh, but look at my to-do list. I have 100 things on my to-do list. I said, no, that's not the question. The question is, what did you plan to do with your time? And I said, what? Let me see your schedule. Oh, it's blank. There's just a dentist appointment on it or something, or maybe a meeting or two. No, we have to plan out every minute of our day, because if you don't plan your day, somebody's going to plan it for you. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, that's so rigid. That seems like a lot of work. I need time for spontaneity. That is the fear of doing the work, rationalizing through your head. Because I was in the same exact place. But I'm telling you, if you sit down and you make that time box calendar by turning your values into time. Let me talk about this for a minute. This is really important. What are values? Values are defined as the attributes of the person you want to become. Okay, values are defined as attributes of the person you want to become. So what we're going to do is we're going to sit down, we're going to ask ourselves, how would the person I want to become spend their time, right? There's a reason we call it paying attention. We don't give attention, we pay attention. Why do we call it paying attention? Because we pay for it just like we pay with dollars and cents. And we wouldn't stand on a corner and say, hey, everybody, here, take my money. Here's a 5, here's a 10, here's 100. We wouldn't just give anybody our money. And yet when it comes to our time, we just give it away. Whoever wants it, take it, because I haven't planned it. That's got to stop. In this day and age, if you don't plan your day, somebody's going to plan it for you. Your boss, your kids, something stupid that happened on Twitter, some media company is going to barge into your life and force you to pay attention unless you in advance decide how you spend your time. Because if you don't plan your day, somebody's going to plan it for you. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. So we're going to turn our values into time. How do we do that? We start with our life domains. Okay, there are 3 life domains. You are at the center. Okay, if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. So what you're going to do, you're going to sit down, you're going to look at the week ahead, and you're going to ask yourself, how would the person I want to become spend their time on themselves? So that might include time for prayer, meditation, reading, a bedtime, right? How many of us scold our kids to get to bed on time because we know how important it is for their mental and physical health? But do we have a bedtime? No, that doesn't make
I do. And then I end up on Facebook or Twitter till 10:15. And 10:15 is my drop dead cutoff. And that's when I get all mad at myself. And I'm like, what? I'm going to be up at 3 in the morning nursing my daughter. What am I doing?
Excellent. Okay, so that's a super important step. So if you have put that time on your calendar, that's a very important step. That's actually step 2 of 4. We skipped over the first step. Incredibly important. Yeah, so incredibly important to put that time on your calendar, to plan time for you. Then the next domain is your relationships, planning time for the important people in your life, planning time to play with your kids, planning time to be with your husband. Don't let them be the residual benefactors, right? The people who get whatever scraps of time are left over. Your friends, your family, put that time on your schedule. We are going through this loneliness epidemic because people don't have the regular occasions on their calendar they used to, right? The bowling club, the church group, they don't have that time on their calendars. We got to bring that time back and have that time and hold it for people who are important in our lives. And then finally, when it comes to our work, now, this is where most people start. They start with the work domain, but it actually needs to come last. Now, there are 2 types of work. We have what we call reactive work and reflective work. Reflective work is the critical time that you do the kind of work that requires you to pay full attention, the kind of work that you can only do without distraction. The planning, the strategizing, the thinking has to happen without distraction. Study after study has found that you cannot do your best work if you can't do it without distraction. So you have to plan that time, at least a few minutes a day, 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day, time to think, for God's sake. Because if you don't, you're just running around. You're doing reactive work all day. The phone calls, the emails, the Slack notifications, that needs to be built in your day as well. no doubt about it. But that can't be your entire day. You have to book some time for that reflective work as well. So this is basically step 2. We skipped step 1 earlier, but this is basically step 2 is about what I call making time for traction by having a time box calendar. Now, the good news is I've made this super easy to do. I actually built an online tool to help people get started, because it does take, maybe 20, 30 minutes to do it the first time. If you go to my blog, nirandfar.com/schedule-maker, maybe you can share the link as well. There's a schedule maker tool there. Again, it's nirandfar.com/schedule-maker. Totally free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't even have to give your email. It's a completely free tool I built just to help people get started with this time boxing practice. And let me tell you, it will change your life. It is so much better than running your life with a to-do list alone.
I feel like that sort of tool and this sort of planning is crucial, especially right now, because I was just talking about this with my VP about how we used to have time built into our day at work where you would walk to your meeting, or you would go get a drink, or you could get up and go do whatever it is that you needed to do. And now it's like people can look at your calendar and book you back to back to back to back to back to back. And that's really unhealthy. And I'm thinking to myself, we need to be booking our own calendars first, building in those times for reflective work, and then having a hard stop at the end of the day when it comes to work. Because sometimes I get in that trap where somebody's still sending me messages at 6:30, 7 o'clock. And then I think, oh my gosh, I need to go in there and answer them. But the reality is no, I need to be with my 4-year-old, my 8-month-old, and my husband.
Yeah. And this is what is so important about it. Now we're focusing just on only one part of the process. You have to do all 4. It's not just good enough to just do one of them. But I will say that this technique of time boxing and creating this time box schedule, one of the benefits is that now you have an artifact, right? Now you have something you can share with people. You can sit down with your boss. This is called what I call schedule syncing, which is where we sit down with our boss. It takes 10 minutes a week, right? You can do it over Zoom. You can do it over any kind of synchronous channel. When you go back to work, you can do it in person as well. But you can sit down with your boss and you can show them how you plan to spend your day. And let me tell you, your boss will worship the ground you walk on, because for anybody who's managed other people, we worry that our employees aren't busy enough, right? Every manager's like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing here? So by you proactively showing them, hey, look, here's how I'm spending my time, you absolve yourself of the worst advice in personal productivity. I told you how bad to-do lists are. Let me tell you the other terrible piece of advice in personal productivity, which is everybody knows the first rule of being more focused is to learn how to say no, right? Haven't we all heard that advice?
Yeah.
Stupid advice, because who's going to look at their boss, the person who pays their check every month, and tell that person no? That's terrible. You're going to get fired. Instead of you being the one who says no, don't do that. Don't get yourself fired. Instead, make your boss the person who says no. How do you do that? You do a schedule sync. You print out or email them this schedule, right, of here's how I plan to spend my time, okay? So at work, here are the projects that I'm working on that you gave me. Here are the priorities. Now you see this other list? Okay, I have this other piece of paper here. And on this other piece of paper, I wrote down all the things that I couldn't put into this week's schedule. Can you help me reprioritize? Okay, is there anything on this list that should be in this week's calendar? And I guarantee you every week there'll be something that needs to be reprioritized. Your boss will say, actually, you know what? That thing is really way more important than this other thing. Let's switch those around. This is how we do a schedule sync. It works with our bosses. It works with our spouses like you would not believe. Okay, I used to have arguments with my wife for years about why I wasn't pulling my share. And by the way, I'm sad to admit this, but this is something that is statistically common among dual income heterosexual couples. Believe it or not, 2020, women still pull a disproportionate share of household admin duties. This is a fact of life.
I hear about it all the time. Yeah, I'm one of the, I don't want to say this too loud, but I have a partner who does more than his fair share.
Oh, you are an anomaly. That is not the case.
I know. But I have friends who are exhausted because of this very situation.
Yeah. And the excuse that I always told my wife was, honey, if I don't do something, just tell me. Right? I don't know.
Right? No, see, I'm the one, I'm more like you. Sometimes he gets upset with me because I won't have had this done or that done. And I'll say, well, why didn't you tell me? I
Exactly.
didn't
Well,
realize that wasn't okay.
here's what I didn't realize, that by me asking my wife to tell me to take out the trash or tell me to make lunch for our daughter or whatever the case might be, I was giving her yet another job. Now
Yeah.
she's not only doing her job, she also have the added job of being my babysitter, of being my boss. That's another responsibility. And that's not fair, because one of my values, I'm not saying it has to be everyone's value, but one of my values is that I want to be in an equitable marriage. I want to pull my weight. It's not fair that my wife does more than I do. And so what do? We sat down and we do a weekly schedule sync.
Hmm.
Life changing. Okay. We sit down once a week. We look at each other's calendars and we make sure that all of our responsibilities are on our calendar so that she knows she can count on me, because she'll know when the trash is going to be taken out. She knows what days I'm making lunch for our daughter. It's all on the calendar, and it takes us 10 minutes a week. And we never have these kind of arguments anymore.
So let me ask you this before we move on to the kids portion, because I'm keenly interested in your take on parenting in this age, especially since, there's so much screen time happening. Kids aren't necessarily in the classroom right now. But the schedule syncing, because that is very novel to me. It's very innovative. Have you had readers or followers put this into practice? And if so, what have they told you?
Oh yeah, I mean it's huge. I mean, once you start keeping a time box schedule, you never go back to any other system. It's so much better than running your life based on a to-do list, because look, it doesn't work. I mean, I've never met anyone who says they finish everything on their to-do list every day. However, think about the psychology. Remember we talked about how behavior change requires identity change versus a to-do list that makes you
Yeah.
feel crappy every day that you didn't finish. Think about what the goal of a time box calendar is. The goal of a time box calendar is to do whatever it is you said you were going to do for as long as you said you were going to do it without distraction. That's it. Not whether you finished the task, okay? That's not part of the deal. The deal is, did you do what you said you were going to do for as long as you said you were going to do it without distraction? So what happens every time you finish that time box is that if you did that, if you just worked on that task without distraction for as long as you said you were, you reinforce your identity of living with personal integrity, of doing whatever it is that you said you were going to do. That's how we become indistractable. We reinforce that identity of doing what we said we were going to do. And the kicker is, the punchline is that people who use that method actually finish more. They actually get more tasks done than the people who worry about finishing the tasks using a to-do list
I
process.
feel like this conversation is better than coffee. And let me tell you, that is high praise coming from me, because
I
everybody
love
knows in
coffee.
this household that mommy needs coffee. I mean, my 4-year-old will say, Mommy needs coffee when I'm not, in the best of moods. But I'm so hype right now, Nir. I'm so
Good.
hype after listening to everything you're saying, because I feel like so many of us need to hear this, because we're constantly like self-flagellating, I mean, we're constantly upset with ourselves because we haven't accomplished the things we wanted to do, and it seems like that list just gets longer and longer. But time boxing, and the thing that you said, I've heard this before but never succinctly, about the behavior changes identity change, because you hear all the time, like, if you really want something, you're going to do it, you're going to find the time to do it. And it's so true, so
It is and it isn't. It is and it isn't.
okay.
Let me refine that a little bit. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, by the way. There are so many apple carts that I overturn in this book. It's
Mhm.
ridiculous. There are so many things that we do that we don't even realize are self-sabotaging our happiness and well-being. One of them is this self-control myth, this willpower myth, that if you really
Yes.
want something, then you
Yes.
just have to really want it, right? Just desire it more. That if if it was important enough to you, you would do it. Turns out in my study of the past 5 years, I've talked to hundreds of people. Many of them have very little, self-control and motivation, and many of them have a lot of self-control and motivation. And it turns out there's no correlation between how much they accomplish every day. That the people who are indistractable, the people who are able to execute on their plans to accomplish their goals and live the kind of life they want, they don't have superhuman motivation and self-control. You know what they have? A system. They simply have practices in place that prevent them from getting distracted in the first place. If there's one mantra to summarize this entire book that I've been working on for the past 5 years, it's this: the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought, right?
Mm.
That procrastination and distraction is not a character flaw. So many of us beat ourselves up. It's not, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not a character flaw. It's not some kind of personality dysfunction. No, it's simply that we don't have the systems in place to deal with impulsiveness. Procrastination and distraction is nothing more than an impulse control problem. But we can
Yep.
learn these tactics because the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. So if you wait till the chocolate cake is on the fork, you're going to eat it, right? Because willpower will lose in that moment. If you wait till the cigarette is lit in your hand, you're going to smoke it. Willpower will lose. If you sleep next to your cell phone every night, it's going to be the first thing you reach for in the morning before you even say hello to your loved one. Again, willpower will lose in the moment. What you need to do is to have a system in place. That's these 4 tactics to becoming indistractable. When you make sure that you master the internal triggers, that's step 1. We didn't get to talk about it, but that's the most important first step. The second step that we talked about a little bit about making time for traction. The third step, hacking back the external triggers, the pings and dings in your life, all the interruptions, the meetings, all the noise that doesn't need to exist in our lives. And then finally, preventing distraction with PACT. When we use all 4 tactics in concert, this is how anyone can become indistractable without needing a lot of motivation or self-control, because the system prevents the distraction from happening in the first place.
And this is all in your book, Indistractable.
Oh yeah, that's this
Yeah.
is the hardest part of what I do, honestly, without a doubt, is summarizing all this research that's taken me 5 years into, like, give me the magic answer. There is no magic answer.
Yeah, but
Book.
it's because this is so pertinent. I mean, this is not, like you said, this is not ivory tower research. I mean, this is our day to day. This is trying to figure out how we can be happier, honestly. And I mean, what was going through my mind, and this is, maybe a little bit personal, but I think that a lot of people watching this will understand is, I had a baby 8 months ago. And with my first, I was able to drop the baby weight within 3 months. And I was like, oh, look at me. I'm so virtuous, right? That hasn't happened this time around. And I tend to feel bad about it, but then listening to you, it's like, but what's my system been? I mean, I'm running from meeting to meeting, and then I'm taking care of the kids, and then I'm collapsing into bed. And then I'm just like, let me zone out for an hour and a half. And it's hard enough to just plan what we're going to have for dinner. I don't even think about what I'm going to eat for breakfast or lunch. So now I'm realizing, well, gosh, I all the time that I spent about feeling bad about baby weight, I could turn it into traction. I could actually plan my day out. And again, I'm sorry, we're going to go into parenting, but you said
No, this
mastering
is
your
great.
triggers. And I think that that's on everyone's mind. So could you please briefly tell me a little bit about
Sure.
that?
I will say though, I have to jump in with the story you just shared, because one of the things that the research finds, and by the way, this everything in the book is not just personal anecdote. I have a research background, and everything is backed by peer-reviewed studies. It's not just my own personal, here's my technique, everybody should do it. No, there's 30 pages of citations from peer-reviewed journals in the book. And one of the things that the research shows is that, in fact, self-compassion is a defining trait of people who are more likely to achieve their long-term goals. That people who talk to themselves the way they would talk to a good friend are more likely to follow through. So it's a very, very important tactic I talk about in the book, about how do we cultivate self-compassion so that even when we go off track, right? Everybody gets distracted from time to time. I still get distracted from time to time. Becoming indistractable does not mean you never get distracted. It means that, unlike a distractible person who keeps getting distracted by the same thing again and again, an indistractable person realizes why they went off track and does something about it. There's a wonderful quote by Paulo Coelho who said, "A mistake repeated more than once is a decision." A mistake
Mm.
more than once is a decision. And I think that's so apropos, because look, if you fall off track, hey, it's a surprise. I didn't realize. Okay, great. But if you don't do something about it, if you keep getting distracted again and again and again by the same stupid things, okay, well then now it's on you. Now it's not that unpredictable thing. It in fact becomes predictable, and it's up to us to do something about it. Okay, now we can get to kids.
Yeah. So, and primarily, I was so inspired by your article, or your conversation rather, with Vanessa Van Edwards about what we can do to raise indistractable children, because it's everywhere. My little guy isn't into video games or any of that yet, but I I'm doing the best I can to make sure that he's out in nature a lot. Like I noticed that that really helps him. And so every Saturday we have our woods walk. And what I do is pretty free range. I just kind of let him do his thing and then I kind of hang back and he loves it and he goes out and he gets dirty. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I've noticed that on those days, he could care less about TV. He could care less about YouTube because it's almost like he's received everything he needed from being dirty and like in the creek and all that sort of thing. So tell me a little bit more about how that relates to what you're talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in the book, so the indistractable is divided into two big sections. The first half of the book is about things that we can do ourselves, right? It's about these 4 steps to become indistractable ourselves. The second half of the book is about the different people and environments we operate in. So there's a whole section about how to have indistractable relationships, how to be an indistractable lover, how to build an indistractable workplace. And then there's a section on how to raise indistractable kids. And one of the points I make in the book that I think is very important that I was surprised to find is that it turns out that this problem of children supposedly overusing technology is really not well understood. That as parents, we tend to blame the stuff outside of us, right? We tend to blame whatever it is that seems to be causing the problem without looking at the deeper causes, the deeper reason. And it turns out there's quite a bit of research around what we call psychological nutrients. That just like we have physiological nutrients, right? We have the macronutrients of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, the 3 macronutrients for our bodies. There are actually these 3 psychological nutrients. This comes from self-determination theory. It's the most widely accepted theory of human flourishing and motivation. This has been around for over 40 years. Researchers find that the 3 psychological nutrients are connectedness, competency, and autonomy. That these 3 things that we need in our life, every human being, especially children, need these 3 psychological nutrients. So we can walk through these 3 psychological nutrients. Okay, so the first thing we need is competency. We need the sense that we can control our environment, that we have some semblance of control. Now, one of the things that we've seen over the past several years that's coincided with the rise of the use of personal technology is also the rise of standardized testing. That there's been this wave of Common Core and No Child Left Behind and teaching towards the test. And so there is a subset of children in this country that is constantly told, you are not competent. In Philadelphia, they start standardized testing in kindergarten twice a year.
Oh,
so they constantly hear this messaging that you are not competent. Well, where do kids go if they don't feel competent in the offline world? Where do they go? It's called the needs displacement hypothesis. They go to the online world, right? So when you play Minecraft or League of Legends or Fortnite, you feel like you're in control. You feel like you're the god of this environment, and that feels good. Then the second psychological nutrient of autonomy. Autonomy is about having some say in the world. It's about doing what you want to do. Well, one of the things that's happened over the past several years is that this is the most scheduled generation in history. And I know I advocate for scheduling our own lives, but there's a very important point here around involving kids in their schedules. Whereas many kids today, they are told what to do all day long, right? Whether it's back when kids were in school, around the school bells buzzing and saying, okay, you have to go this class or that class. And now we have to go to Kumon and test prep and Mandarin and swimming and ballet and Taekwondo lessons. Where is the time to just play, right? Where is the time to just have some autonomy and freedom? So
yeah, I used to spend my summers watching TV and outside, and it was totally fine. And I did fine in school. I don't understand the need for all this scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, there is, I think as long as kids are involved, especially now that we are homeschooling, that so many kids are we're forced to be in quarantine. I think that in fact, I think it can go too much the other way, that when kids don't have any schedule at all, I think that's also detrimental. So the key here is to involve them. If you are involving them and making them their schedule, any school age child, so starting from 5 years old, sitting down and understanding, okay, here's mommy or daddy's schedule. How do you want to spend your time? How much time do you want with mommy or daddy? How much time do you want talking to grandma and grandpa on FaceTime? Or how much time do you want playing video games or watching YouTube videos? None of this stuff in moderate amounts. We know that 2 hours or less of extracurricular age appropriate screen time has no deleterious effects. So as long as we know that that time that they have autonomy in those decisions, it goes a very far way in terms of giving them that sense of control and freedom. And then that third psychological nutrient that I think is particularly missing today is this idea of relatedness, that we all need the opportunity to understand others and to be understood ourselves. But today, because of this, I think, over focus on institutionalized learning, right? It's got to be soccer lessons. It can't just be, let's go out and play with a ball. No, we need to have a coach that tells the kids what to do all day long so that they get a scholarship to go to college, as opposed to what they really need is free play. And we know that today, the amount of free play that kids get, the free play is defined as time with your peers without the supervision and direction of coaches, teachers, and parents, that it's an all-time low that kids have for free play. So free play is where we get socialization. It's among the most healthy thing that you can do for your child psychologically. And I think this is part of why we have such a fragile generation these days, is because they haven't had that time to figure out their place in the world, right? Free play is where you're told by your friends, hey, if you act like a jerk, I'm not going to play with you, right? It's only in that free play. You can't get that lesson from your parents or from your teachers. That has to come from a peer. And so we have to find ways to supplement that free play, especially now that so many kids are trapped at home. It's no surprise that where do they go to get that sense of relatedness? They go to Fortnite, they go to TikTok, they go to Instagram, because that's where they're connecting with their friends. And so if they're not going to do it in the offline world, they look for it in the online world.
Oh my goodness. All of this is just like, my brain's going like this, because especially the autonomy thing too. I mean, one thing you're always hearing when you have toddlers is that they want a little bit of control over their lives because they have zero. Everything is, we're telling them, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and that sort of thing, and to give them a little autonomy. And I'm sure that it goes, as they get older, they need even more autonomy. So this is also helpful. I mean, I think that the main thing is that parents need some reassurance that just because their kids are playing video games, that's not a bad thing. But I love how you're saying dig deeper. Why are they playing the video games? Why are they doing these things? And it comes back to the connectedness. Is there anything that we as parents can do to reinforce those three?
Yeah, I'm not advocating, by the way, for more screen time.
Yeah.
I think the idea here is to make sure that we are involving children in the discussion. And in fact, we can use the same exact 4 steps, that we can help kids master their internal triggers, starting by understanding what their internal triggers are, by understanding why they are using this technology to this degree as an escape, because they're missing their psychological nutrients in the real world. We can give them those psychological nutrients in other ways that don't necessarily involve technology. So I think that's step 1. The second step is making time for traction, right? Involving them, not dictating, here's how much, here's how you're going to spend your entire day, but involving them in planning their day according to their values and respecting that. If your kid wants to play video games for an hour a day, as long as that content is age appropriate, there's nothing wrong with it, right? Don't give your kids age inappropriate content, but no study has found that 2 hours or less of extracurricular screen time, as long as it's age appropriate, has any deleterious effects. So respect that time. Leave them alone, for God's sakes, if they want to play video games for 2 hours. Now, if it's excessive, right? If we're finding a kid is playing 5-6 hours a day, well, look, 5 or 6 hours a day of anything. I remember when my daughter was really into Harry Potter. She was reading Harry Potter for 5 hours. That's too much Harry Potter. Why? Not because reading Harry Potter is somehow evil, but that it comes at the expense of other things. There's an opportunity cost. Spending time with the parents, spending time with your friends, spending time doing other things, that's the cost. So we don't want to frighten kids that somehow technology is melting their brains. We want to make them aware of the price they're paying by not being able to spend that time doing something else. The third thing we can do is to hack back the external triggers. So by, I think a very simple piece of advice that I would, implore parents to consider is that we know that sleep is absolutely imperative for kids' psychological well-being. That anything that boops, buzzes, or beeps in the bedroom needs to be gone. There is no reason for a kid to have a laptop or a cell phone. A television. I don't know why children need televisions in their bedroom. I don't know why adults do either, frankly. That should be
We don't. I prioritize that. I said, no, the bedroom is for sleep. Like, we're not watching TV.
keep those devices outside. The only thing that I think is okay is a Kindle. I think, you know, Kindles are fine if you wake up in the middle of the night. They actually can help you fall back asleep. And the light that they have these days actually that it emits doesn't keep you up like the tablet devices or your phone would. So something that's not connected to the internet, that you can't scroll and scroll on. Everything that could disturb sleep should not be in the bedroom. That's part of removing these external triggers. There's a lot more advice and tips to follow, but it's really about using those 4 key strategies of mastering the internal triggers, making time for traction, hacking back the external triggers, and preventing distraction with packs. And the most important thing is that we as parents need to be indistractable ourselves. That children are born with hypocrisy detection devices.
Oh,
They
yeah.
come with little invisible antenna that are constantly scanning to see where you screw up. So we cannot tell our kids to get off Facebook while we're scrolling email. It doesn't work that way. We have to set a good example by becoming indistractable ourselves.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think I speak for everybody. I could talk to you for like another 3 hours, but I know that you have time boxed your schedule. I'm grateful to have been on your schedule.
My
But
pleasure.
wow, I mean, so much really good information and just reassurance in all sorts of ways. I think number one for me is just removing the shame and not being able to get that to-do list done and all these other things, because you have to have a strategy and a plan. And I can't wait to say, and this is music to my husband's ears, by the way. I mean, he is somebody who likes to, he does user experience and he plans things out and project manages. So he's going to be super excited about project managing our schedule. And I just want to thank you so much. I mean, Hooked is in our house. We have the book, and now obviously we're going to be reading Indistractable because that's what we all want to get to. So Nir, I can't thank you enough for your brain.
Oh.
And your passions and just the ease with which you're able to communicate this stuff, because this is so important. I mean, this is for Wellness Friday, and I feel like a lot of people are really going to feel like, whoa, I'm getting a lot of stuff that's really important for me to feel better about myself. So thank you so much for
Oh,
spending this
my
time with us.
pleasure.
And
Sincerely, my
I'm
pleasure.
going to stay in touch with you and tell you what I think of Indistractable, and
Yes.
hopefully we can have you back on, because this has been fantastic. So thank
That would be
you so
great to do.
much.
We should do a follow-up episode to see how it works out and tweak and see how, you see what gets in your way. That would be great.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be great. And
let's
then I
do
can
it.
come to you and say, oh my gosh, look at all the things I've
I would love to.
covered. Oh, thank you so much, dear. Have a great day. Thanks so much for
My
spending
pleasure.
time with me.
Thank you. Take care.